Hello, my name is Chris Peterson, and I will be talking about the solar radiation on a sitting car and how it affects its inside temperature. What to expect from this presentation um, is an explanation of a car sitting in the sun with its windows rolled up and how the sun heats it up, even in outside temperatures that are mild, roughly 70 degrees or so. We'll talk about whether or not the inside temperature of a car can become dangerous within an hour of sitting in the sun. We'll talk about how the inside of the car heats up over time. We'll discuss an actual experiment conducted. We'll discuss its results and its observations, and then conclude with what we've learned and talked about, as well as improvements that can be made on the experiment. So a car sitting in direct sunlight, as you've probably noticed, will heat up quite a bit on the inside, and the inside temperature will far exceed the outside temperature of the car. These factors include the elevation at which the car is sitting. So at higher elevations, the sun doesn't have as much atmosphere that it has to go through in order to heat up some sort of surface on the earth. So at high elevations, more energy is absorbed basically than at a lower elevation where a lot of that solar energy is filtered and absorbed by the atmosphere itself. The time of day is important because early in the morning or later in the evening, the angle at which the sun is irradiating on the surface quite drastically its effects of energy transfer to that surface. The outside temperature does have an effect, not as strong of one, but it does. And then the color of the car. A black car will have practically an absorptivity of 1, meaning it absorbs almost all the energy from the irradiation, while a white or silver car will reflect much of that energy instead of absorbing it. What are the claims made? So, according to heatkills.org, within 60 minutes, inside temperatures of a car can reach dangerous levels. So, within 60 minutes, they claim that it can rise approximately 40 degrees Fahrenheit. That can happen in a mild 70 degree Fahrenheit atmosphere outside of the car. And usually, the most extreme energy transferred would be midday when the sun is most intense. How exactly does this occur? Part of it can be explained through the resistance method of heat transfer. Just to summarize that, I will go into more depth on it, but just to summarize it, a direct sunlight adds energy to a surface, which then is conducted through that surface and into the inside surface, which then convects to the air inside the car. I will also talk about sunlight passing through the windshield of the car, heating up its interior, which then heats up the inside of the car. So this schematic here gives us a good understanding of how the resistance method works. On the outside, we have both convection and radiation. The convection is less important, but in our experiment, it's a little bit important for a bit until the inside temperature of the car already reaches the outside temperature. But because irradiation is most important, what we have is sun rays shining on the surface of the top of our car, which heats up the surface quite significantly. And then that has to go through, that heat will then transfer through the roof of our car to the inside surface of the car, which will then convect to the air of the car, heating the inside air of the car. Just so you have an understanding of what's going on over here, these are the different modes of heat resistance. So we have convection. We should also add to this irradiation, but for the sake of time, we won't. So we have our irradiation, then we have conduction, and then convection to the inside of the car. So basically, this is kind of like a voltage drop through an actual resistor in an electrical circuit, but instead it's a heat difference of temperature drop through the resistance caused by air and the solid part of the car. And then this equation here is just the energy transferred from the outside to the inside of the car. Now, as far as the sun heating the inside of the car through the windshield, so in our last example, we had the sun coming down onto the roof of the car, heating the roof of the car, which then passes through the roof and then heats the inside and then convects to the inside of the car. Well, we basically just skip a step as it goes through the windshield of the car. The windshield does absorb some of the energy of the car, but obviously not all of it, and so our sun will come through, heat up the inside of the car, meaning the inside surface, which in our case, the surface is black, so it'll absorb a lot more energy than the top of the car will, which is white. And so that surface will heat up quite significantly, which will then convect the inside of the car. In our actual experiment, we used a white Honda CR-V. We started at approximately 11 a.m., which is about the start of the sun's most intense energy transfer during the day. So from about 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. Our testing period was 1 hour, and we took temperature samples every 20 minutes. The temperature probe was placed in what I call an average temperature area. So basically, we understand that where the sun is heating up the interior of the car near the dash will be here, as shown, will be much warmer than the rear where it's all shaded and whatnot. So, and then we also know that the top of the car and the inside will be much warmer than, say, the bottom where your feet are, because that heat has to transfer all the way from the top to the bottom. So what I did was I placed my temperature probe roughly right here, and I'll go into a little more depth as to why. But I felt that that was a good average temperature of the inside of the car. Before starting, the car was ran with the air conditioning on until the interior of the car reached approximately 65 degrees Fahrenheit, which was less than the outside temperature of 70 degrees, which was nice because that was what our heatkills.org had said, that a car can heat up 40 degrees or so even in 70-degree weather, and so I started below 65 on the inside, and our outside temperature was 70 and only rose approximately 4 degrees, as seen in the table to the right. After the first 20 minutes, we had a temperature rise of about 3 degrees. Not so promising and not very high, but as time went on, it seemed to increase much, much more. So at 40 minutes, we had a 10.5 degree rise, and at 60 minutes, a 23.7 degree rise. So not quite what was claimed by heatkills.org, but we don't know the circumstances of their testing either. Still, it is a pretty significant rise just in 60 minutes. So the observations that I had made, and as I described earlier, was as I would get in the car to read temperatures, I noticed that near the dash, so in this area here, especially on the interior, it was much warmer than most of the car here in the rear. Also, I'd noticed that as I put my hand closer to the roof of the car here, it was much, much warmer than in the middle as well as the bottom. This definitely explains why whenever I come home from exercising my dog at the park, my dog likes to sit in the bottom of the car because it's much cooler down there. And so to explain more why I decided to place my temperature probe right here was because if a child is in the car or left in the car, they will feel heat in this area the most. Their head would be roughly in this area as they sit in their car seat. And so as the car heats up, this is the most intense temperature that they will feel being in the car. And I thought that that was more important than knowing anywhere else in the car. So is it truly unsafe to leave your car out in the sun for 1 hour with somebody in it? Well, the answer to that is yes. Never leave your kid in the car, no matter what. But in our experiment, I don't think the temperatures reached significantly dangerous temperatures, but that being said, I would not have wanted to have sat in the car the whole time because it would have been very uncomfortable. I do also think that if the car was black, then it would have had a much more significant effect on the temperature rise inside the car and could have definitely reached a very high temperature. And because the car started at such a cool temperature, it took more energy to heat it up to the 88 degrees that it did. And so I think if the car started, even at 75 degrees, it could have heated significantly higher to 90 or 100 degrees, which I do believe would be unsafe for anyone sitting in a car. So anything that would have improved this would be to have tried several different experiments with different cars of different, maybe the same car, but the same car with different colors. So again, it would have been nice to have tested not just a white car, but a black car or a red car or a blue car. It would have been nice to run more than just one test. And then another thing to help accuracy would be to have used different temperature probes just to get different readings. And that will conclude this presentation.